Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 on mindful clothing. But before we go on, here's what's happening at the farm. So, summertime, maybe this comes from being a public school teacher for so many years, and also we're just really loving school. But so, always, summertime is kind of a time of rejuvenation for me. It's a time when there aren't any big shows. Yes, we're still doing monthly open studios, and I can be open if people are passing through and want to come and shop. But for the most part, it's kind of a low season. So, so I love it because this is the time that I can really stretch myself creatively. So I was just thinking I have 4 knitting projects going. One I haven't knit on for a while. But I have 4 knitting projects going. My sweater is nearly complete. I just have to do like what is it? Like 8 more rounds, I should say. And bind off and then do the sleeves, which isn't a whole lot because it's kind of a short cap sleeve. So that is within view of being done. I'm really excited about that. I have my knit along cowl that I'm working on, which I will probably put aside until the knit along actually happens so I can knit with people. But I think I have enough done so that I can write my pattern. I have the souvenir shawl from the FAST program, the FAST um, Open Studio a couple weeks ago that I just have started, and I need to get back to that. And I have my mohair blanket that is all naturally dyed. So I've got 4 knitting projects going. I have I have scarves on the loom, which I just finished one, and so now I'll do the second one with have a different warp, so that it gives a little bit of a different look. It's all a hand painted warp, and just a very simple twill pattern, 8-inch scarf made with tencel. Um, it's been years since I've actually sat down and woven something for myself, so I'm really excited about that. It's turning out really, really beautiful. And so I'm really liking that. And then I have a sewing project that right now I'm hand appliquing things on. And I'll probably do some embroidery with that. And along with that, I've got so many other ideas. I want to do a fresh indigo pot. I made a linen top a couple months ago, and I want to do some embroidery around the collar for that, which I have not even begun yet, but I have ideas for. So summer is the time that I really love because I get to stretch myself out. I take down the production of so much yarn um, for at least, 6 or 8 weeks. I'll start gearing up again in August for the fall shows, but and I'll do a little bit here and there because I like it. I love dyeing, and that's what I do. But it's not a have to. So this is a really great time for me. So that's what's happening on the farm. So just to recap the previous 5 episodes, so we've been talking about fast fashion and the consequences that it has not only to our planet, our climate, our bodies, and basically our money. And we started in the last session to talk about slow fashion or farm to needle or farm to closet and table. And I've given you some tasks to do to start changing over your wardrobe and household textiles to get back to being more local and more sustainable for your family, your own body, and the planet. So, where do we go from fast to slow local fashion? How do we get there? And like I said in previous episodes, I've been trying to figure out how to pivot my wardrobe from fast to slow for a couple of years now. And it's definitely a process. And I would just want to make sure that, it's not something to get overwhelmed about. It's just to take it step by step, to take baby steps to change over your wardrobe to a more sustainable, climate beneficial wardrobe. I was reading this book. It's called Where No Evil. It's by Greta Egan. And I really liked that she has an integrity index. So she's delineated 16 factors that they're kind of like your own internal values. And she explains that in order not to be overwhelmed, to just pick 4 or 5 of these that mean the most to you, and that's where you start. We're all not going to just jump in, throw out all of our clothes, um, and and compost as much as we can, all that stuff, and change everything over again. It just doesn't work that way. So I thought I'd share the 16 factors with you so that you might also pick your 4 or 5 that mean the most to you. The first one is natural dyeing or low impact dyeing. So low impact dyeing is what most of us small batch dyers do. It uses very little water in the grand scheme of things. And while we're using chemical based dyes, it has a low impact on the environment. Um, if I'm calculating my dyes correctly, when I'm done dyeing, what I have left is I have beautiful yarn or fabric that's dyed, and I have water. I have a mixture of water and vinegar. Like all the dye has gone into the fiber, and none of it is left in the pot to be thrown out. It's just a little bit of acidified water. And natural dyeing can sometimes use more water if you're talking about natural dyeing in a bigger setting. But if it's also small batch, it's going to be very similar to what we already do. So you just need to ask the dyers how what their water consumption is if that's something that's important to you. And as a consumer, you need to know that some of the ingredients that dyers use for natural dyeing are also chemicals, and sometimes they can also be a little toxic. Like sometimes people use copper or zinc um, or chromium, things like that to get some different color changes, and you would want to stay away from that kind of thing. For myself, any color changes that I do after the dye are based with iron, and it's just basically rust water. So it's not going to be something that's going to be harmful for the environment or for yourself. So that's number one, picking low impact or natural dyeing as a value. Number two is using natural fibers because they're biodegradable. We've talked about this a lot. But also know that in the case of some plant fibers, water use and pesticide use can be very high. So it can be important to look for organic cotton or linen, cotton in particular, because then the pesticides aren't being used. Um, the index factor number 3 is organic fibers. So, again, you're eliminating the pesticides and the herbicides, but there can still be high water usage. A lot of this is totally out of our control. It's just the way that farming is done. And if you want to have organic natural fibers that are naturally dyed as part of your 4 or 5, your top 3 things, it may be a little bit more high water usage, but you're also taking, you're making your dollars vote for not using pesticides and herbicides. Number 4 is fair trade and fair compensation. People need to be paid a living wage, and also we need to make sure that we're not promoting businesses that are using child labor. And so there are some companies that are totally transparent about what they're paying their people and about not using child labor, and also researching what some of the laws are in these different countries that are doing primarily the sewing, but they are also doing the dyeing and the growing of the fibers. So just making sure that people are being paid a living wage, fair compensation is number 4. Number 5 is recycled and upcycled, because this is going to reduce the waste in our landfills like we've seen before. And it will hopefully break the debt cycle of some of the third world citizens that are selling our discarded clothing. Our clothing goes over um, primarily to Africa. It comes in big bales, and um, entrepreneurs buy these bales, they sort through them, and then they resell to the people in their communities. And more often, more and more lately, they're getting a lot of trash, you know, things that aren't actually clothes anymore. Like they may be totally ripped, or maybe they weren't sewn in the first place, like pieces of, fabric that's been cut to be sewn, but then it didn't sell. So you have these just pieces of fabric. Um, and so those entrepreneurs can't sell those as clothing. And they get into this debt cycle because they don't have money to buy the next bale, and on and on and on. Buying local. This is number 6, because that reduces the CO2 emissions for transportation, but more importantly, it's building community, and it also is supporting your own local economy. Just as community supported agriculture supports your farming community, so does community-based fiber support your local fiber farmers. Number 7 is social justice, buying textiles from underserved communities, and making sure, again, about that it's fair trade. There's lots of NGOs that are working towards this kind of value, and you can certainly buy clothing from them that it's 100% natural, and in some cases is organic as well. Zero waste is number 8. So looking for companies that are committed to zero waste, instead of the approximately 100 tons of fabric that's left as waste even before it's made into clothing. Like what I was talking about before, is that it may have been, the cloth may have been cut, but it was never sewn into anything, and it just goes into the trash stream. So looking for companies that are committed to a zero waste. And again, you're going to be, for that, I think you're going to be looking at smaller companies where, they don't want to be wasting their money by throwing things in the trash either. Slow fashion would be number 9. And so what Greta is talking about there is looking for local makers. And local makers a lot of times will have a high level of craftsmanship. If you find a leather worker who is making, beautiful purses, that is, somebody that's local and has a high level of craftsmanship, you're buying quality that you're going to keep for a long time. Plus, because it's local, you're also building up your community as well. Factor number 10 would be vegan. So avoiding leather and silk, your regular silk, and instead looking for piece silk products where the silkworms are not killed before the silk is harvested. If you have questions about that, go ahead and email me. I don't want to get into that whole process right now, but piece silk, in some cases it would be called wild silk. It's where the moths are allowed to mature. Number 11 is water footprint. So in that case, especially in those places where there's a lot of water being used in the dyeing, in the spinning, in everything, look for companies that use a closed water system. What I mean by that is that they recycle the water. They use the water, they collect the water at the end, and instead of it going into a stream someplace or the sewer, it goes back to the front and gets used over and over again. And so that will reduce wastewater, and it reduces the water use throughout the manufacturing process. And especially these days with, there's so many countries that are on the verge of being waterless. We need to be thinking about our water usage as well. Number 12 is transparency. Can you see what the company ethics are, and can you see what their practices are? And we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about researching brands, and definitely some brands are more transparent than others. And so, again, vote with your dollars. Factor number 13 is soil to soil, and this is the concept where you can compost your natural fiber textiles. And it's part of like a bigger idea, and the idea being that the fiber is grown on the land. It comes from the land, it comes from the earth, whether that is a plant or whether it is like wool or alpaca, any of your animal fibers, where the animals are eating the plants that grow in the soil, right? And then you wear it until you can wear it no longer. When you are done with it, you put it in your compost pile. And because it's 100% natural, it will biodegrade. And this is really very important also climate-wise, and it's helping to sequester carbon as well. Number 14 would be convertible. And I really had to look at this. It's like, I'm not talking about one of those snazzy little sports cars, but rather, what else can you do with those items, with those garments? Can they be worn in a few different ways? Can they be used in a couple of different ways? And, some different looks, like, can you wear that sari as a skirt or as a bathing suit cover-up, those kind of things. Number 15 is buying secondhand, and thrifting is really on trend these days. And I'm amazed at the beautiful quality garments that you can find in thrift stores these days, especially those that are more upscale, like maybe your hospital thrift stores, those kind of things, or maybe like a church-based thrift store, where they're getting things that are a little bit higher quality than Goodwill. But even at Goodwill or Salvation Army, I have found cashmere sweaters, alpaca sweaters, things like that. And number 16 is, of course, style. How can you incorporate your fashion sense in with all these other fashion values? So in her book, Wear No Evil, Greta is suggesting, and I agree with this, is that you pick 4 to 5 of those and start there, as this is what I want to work on first, but as I'm changing over my wardrobe. Another movement that I wanted to talk about is called the Make Your Label Count movement. And this is a movement that's happening in the EU, but it can certainly be a benefit to us in the US, and perhaps it's one that we should really be promoting here ourselves. So what it means is that in the EU, they want to have standardized labels that are more transparent, that allow you to make better informed choices about the clothing that you're going to buy. And so, is it recyclable? Is it all natural? Has it been made in fair trade? How long will this material hold up? What is the carbon footprint? Those kinds of things. And what the Make the Label Count movement is they want to have a standard methodology for the sustainability claims that are being made by the fashion industry. A lot of manufacturers, yes, they realize that we want things that are more sustainable and that are quote unquote greener and that are more climate beneficial, especially in the EU. I think that they're way ahead of us on that. But so these standards have been skewed a little bit towards the manufacturers. And what the Make the Label Count movement is about is to make sure that those standards come back to what is really happening. For instance, they say that that the carbon-based, the fossil-based clothing has no different uh, carbon footprint than natural fibers, which is not quite right, but it's because of the way that they're measuring this, and it's making it um, look that way. So it's kind of like a political situation. Um, but the point is, we need to have some ways that we can make more informed choices, and we need to have standard methodologies that makes that sustainability really count. So these standards, they're called PEFs, in case you ever run into that. And I was like, what's a PEF? A product environmental footprint standard. So the problem with the current ones is they're not complete. They don't take into account all the negatives of the fossil fuel-based fabrics. Like, they don't take into account microplastics. They don't take into account the carbon emissions. But they also don't take into account all the positives of the circular natural fiber production, like the fact that there aren't microplastics, like the fact that it is carbon sequestering and not carbon emitting, those kind of things. So the goal is to empower and inform all the customers so that the values of the climate neutrality can be achieved. And hopefully we can um, ask, ask our manufacturers to do the same things. It's pie in the sky, especially in our current political climate, but it's always good to have a goal, right? The last thing that I wanted to show you is called the hierarchy of needs, or the biology pyramid. And so this hierarchy also shows it's like the ideal of buying textiles, and specifically clothes. So it's a pyramid. For those of you who are listening, it's a pyramid. On the bottom, where you have your biggest, it's like, use what you have. Of course, you want to use what you have for as long as you can, care for them appropriately so they last longer. The next step up is swap or borrow. And I think that the borrowing part really works well if you're thinking about like special occasion gowns or suits. There's lots of those, Rent the Runway and items like that, where you can borrow something that you're only going to be wearing once. Why should you buy something that you'd be only wearing once? And swaps are really fun to do with friends. And if you aren't all in the same range of sizes, think about swapping accessories and shoes. Because again, that's something that sometimes lands in, gets worn once, and it's like, oh, those didn't really fit my feet. But maybe you could swap them with somebody else, and you get something that is better fitting, right? Um, I don't know how many pairs of shoes that they feel okay in the store, and then you get them home and it's like, oh my gosh, or you wear them for a long period of time and you have blisters and all that. So like, think about swapping them with people. On the next level is thrifting, and specifically looking for those garments that are all natural fibers, good construction, and things that maybe you could repurpose or upscale. Um, I was watching some program, and it was about thrifting, and this woman went into the men's sections of the thrift stores to look. A lot of times men's clothes are much better made, and was looking for like blazers, suit jackets, sweaters, things like that, that could then be, worn over, your regular clothes, right? But you have added kind of an accessory thing, garment that could last for a long time because it's better made. Going up one more level, it's the make. If you can make, then make it. Or maybe you partner with a maker if you aren't somebody that can make. And lastly, buy new. But buy new is very, very small in comparison with all the other things that you can do before you get to the buy thing, the buy step. So here's your call to action. So I do want you to go back. I want you to decide on the 4 or 5 categories of the integrity index that are most important to you. And in the notes, the show notes, I will write down the 16. So in case you didn't get them all, you can look at the list from at the website. And then please do write and let me know what you're choosing to do, because I think we're more stronger together. If we're working together on some of these factors, that would be amazing. For instance, if we were all working towards, okay, from now on, I'm going to buy organic natural fibers whenever I can. Wouldn't that be amazing if, like, in my listening audience, like everybody was doing that and working together? I think it'd be fantastic. And lastly, please go to Instagram, Facebook, and follow the following things. Follow at Chesapeake Fiber Shed, especially if you are in our area, if you're local to me. Follow at Fibershed. Also follow hashtag Fibershed and hashtag Make the Label Count to stay informed about what's happening in the community and what's happening in the world around this idea of circularity, of sustainability, and of climate beneficial clothing. And until next time, happy making.